Hi there, this is Mr. Kiddos, and we're going to talk about force. Right. Before we do that, you should have a note taker ready to go. So you can copy it from Google Classroom or you can print it from Google Classroom. If that makes sense. This is what it looks like. Notice that we have a title that needs to be filled out, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns, and some space for each. A word is going to go in here, a phrase in direction, and another phrase here. A symbol is just going to be a letter with another letter, and then an equation is going to be here. So we're not going to worry about the equation today. That's something we have to figure out in the lab. All right. So this will be a reference page for us to have from now on. So as we find new forces, we will add them in. Today, I'm going to give you 4 forces and give you some terms to go with them. All right. Notice that we have that up there and we have this down here. Just make sure you have at least those 2 things on there. You don't need to draw all the lines, right? Just make sure you have space for these 5 things. All right. Here we go. Back to what the heck is a force? Oh yeah, it's the child. Baby Yoda. No, not that force. A force is just straightforwardly, it's a physics thing. It's an interaction between 2 objects. That's it. So let's practice interactions. We were looking at interactions with compression, stretching, and shearing. So let's take a look at these situations really quick and see what is common among all of these things. It'd be very strange. Like, you think, well, they're not all standing on something because the apple's flying through the air, so that's not the case. And oh, they're all moving, except the banana's not moving. So, well, all these objects are probably within Earth's gravitational pull, so definitely have that in common. All right, so we are going to fill out those 4 columns. All right, the type is going to be gravitational. The direction, well, think about it. Which way, if I were just to let go of something, which way would it go? Well, it would fall down, right? It goes down towards the earth. Now, here's the interesting thing. That's a pole then, right? So it's a vertical pole, like it pulls you, not a pole like something you run into, but it actually pulls you down. Well, here's the interesting thing is, if it actually, you are actually pulling it up, pulling the earth up. So here's an example. The moon and the earth have a gravitational attraction with each other. The moon is pulled towards the earth and the earth is pulled towards the moon. Pretty cool, huh? Which one goes around the other? Well, depending on your point of view, I guess. No, it's pretty much the moon goes around the earth, at least from our point of view, right? When is it present? Pretty much all the time. All of our situations are usually on Earth, and so we'll have this gravitational force. This is also known as the object's weight. It has a special symbol, F, big F, with a little g. All right. So what about the equation? Like I said, don't worry about that, right? We're going to worry about that later. Actually, within the next week or 2, we'll figure out the equation for weight. Maybe within this week. Here's an example of all those poles. Now, you can see here that the earth is pulling down on the apple, the earth is pulling down on the banana, the earth is pulling down on the cart, down on the fencer. Well, the banana is pulling up on the earth as well, and so is the apple pulling up on the earth, and so is the car pulling up on the earth, and so is this fencer here. So why aren't those arrows present? Well, because the earth is really big and it would look like it's coming from the ground, not from the earth. So if we were to zoom out, you would see all the arrows acting on the earth. Sure. You'll see the rest of them will be in pairs. So let's take a look. What about these situations here? What do you think they have all in common? Think back to your worksheet. Yeah, you're right. It is a stretch or a tension force. The direction is going to be always along the stretch, and it's always a pull. Okay? When is it present? Oh gosh, rope, string, wire, anything basically can stretch. So like even clay, if you're stretching clay, the stretchy bands that you exercise with, those things, bungee cords, you name it, anything that can stretch. This is called the tension force. And the symbol is capital F, little t. Now watch when we overlay some of the arrows on here, you can see the pulling apart of the rope. Like if we're centered on the rope, I can see the top is getting pulled up and the bottom is getting pulled down. Over here, same thing. If I focus on the center of this little part of the wire, it's pulling along that wire, right? To the right. Here's a picture frame with a wire nailed in, and here we are with our poles on the string. And this is a spring, which we'll come back and call the spring force, but for now it's also a tension. So kind of cool. All right, moving on. What about these? Now this one's a twofer. What interaction do all these things have in common? If you said compression and shear, you're on the right track. Absolutely. So let's look at compression first. The compression between surfaces is going to be called uh, a special force, right? It's a contact force between two surfaces, and it's normal to the direction is going to be normal to the surfaces in contact. Normal is a mathematics term that means perpendicular. So you'll see that in a second when I put the arrows on over here. When is it present? Basically, anytime there is surface to surface contact, there's going to be that compressive force, the compression force of normal force. And it's not normal like, oh, this is not very normal over here. No, normal is in perpendicular. Right? So perpendicular force, people didn't want to say perpendicular, I guess. Normal is a math term. Math is the language of science, so there you go. Right? The symbol would be capital F and little n. Let's look at what those arrows look like. You can see like this block is pushing down onto the surface, and the surface is pushing up onto the block. This shoe and this shoe is pushing down into the floor, and this floor is pushing up into the shoe, and so on. This person's pushing into the refrigerator or whatever that is, and the refrigerator is pushing right back, and the refrigerator is pushing down on the ground, and the ground is pushing back up, and the ping pong paddle is pushing up and to the left on the ball, and the ball is pushing down and to the right on the uh, paddle. And that's perpendicular to the surface of contact there. Kind of cool. All right. Oh, wait. Remember this? We said this was a twofer. So we talked about compression. Now we're going to talk about shear. And that particular shear force is going to be a parallel force to the surface, and that is friction. All right. The direction is always going to be parallel and actually opposing any kind of slip. So if this refrigerator is you're trying to get to move to the right, the frictional force will be to the left. Now, if you think about our feet, though, it's kind of interesting. When I push back on the ground to make myself go forward, you would think that friction would be against you, but yeah, you're kind of right. But friction is actually in the direction that you're headed because your leg is pushing backwards. It's trying to, if it slips backwards, you don't go anywhere. So if you maintain, it goes against the direction of slip, which would be to the left. That means it's going to go against that, which means my frictional force is to the right. We use friction to walk. That's pretty cool. So we, we need friction to speed up. Isn't that cool? All right, anyway, let's take a look. When is it present? Anytime there's contact between two surfaces and there's some kind of resistance to that slip, you more than likely have friction. Now, sometimes we like to talk about frictionless, which is possible, but and it's nice and clean, but generally there is some kind of friction in there. Last but not least, the symbol is capital F, little f. All right, so let's take a look at those shear forces. So if this block was going to slide downwards, the the force would be up and to the left on it, and the force from it onto the surface would be down and to the right. And so that's where we get all these little pairs in here and so on. And when those people who do fancy shots with the ping pong ball will make it spin, well, that's because of friction that you added on to it as you were hitting the ping pong ball. Kind of cool. So this ping pong ball is going to come in, and then it's going to do some fancy stuff after that. So these are the 4 common forces that we have so far. The force due to gravity, also known as weight, the force due to tension or stretch, the force due to compression, also known as the normal force, and the force due to friction, which is a shear force, and we sometimes just call it friction. All right, there we go. So now that we have that kind of filled out on your document, let's go to another sheet of paper, and we're going to talk about 3 things: situation, system, and objects. So whenever you're dealing with a problem, you're going to look at the situation, identify the system, and then focus on what objects are involved. So let's take a look at that. Okay, let's go from the top down. Situation is an annotated drawing. So whenever you get a situation, you're going to make a drawing and you're going to make notes on it. So it's all the objects required to understand the problem. For example, we had the fan carts turned off, but it was rolling at a constant velocity. Right? We did that on the interactions on Wednesday. We pushed the little simulated fan carts, and they actually didn't really stick together, but they moved together at a constant pace. They were off, and they're rolling one way or another. So what would that look like realistically? It would be like this. That'd take a long time to draw, and that's only one cart, and I have to draw the other one, and then I have to show like how is it moving. That's really cool. Awesome. Cool art skills. But we can actually go very simplified. Notice I didn't even include wheels on here because it's implied that because we said it's a fan cart, that would have wheels. Okay, we don't have to actually draw wheels. It's a box, and I put this little triangle on top to show like which direction the fan is facing. It's gonna want to go this way, for example, and this one's going to want to go that way. And yeah, look at my fancy motion lines. Those are, I tend to like to make things evenly spaced out, kind of like a motion map. So that shows that it's going at a constant pace, right? This little notation down here, annotation for velocity, saying which way is it going, and there's a quick written description underneath. Kind of nice. All right, for a system, we're going to use what's called interaction diagrams to identify the system. A system is really a collection of one or more objects that are relevant to the situation. So we're going to use interaction diagrams to identify the objects and then the system that is a collection of those objects. Here's our example again, right? The fan carts. We had those 2 carts that were rolling to the right. Well, what are the objects involved? What are the things? Okay. Well, we have fan cart A and fan cart B. Kind of color coded it here for you, right? And then we have the track, and we think we'd be done. Except wait, remember, always, 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 we're going to be on Earth, and the Earth is a major player, so we need the Earth field in there as well. You can write Earth. I prefer Earth field, so I don't get confused between the ground Earth, like the Earth in my hands, or the celestial object Earth. So I just add the word field. That's a little more technical physics term. Yep, Earth field. Okay. Remember, that's usually involved. Oh, what are these things? These are interactions, and look, they're labeled with the type they are. Notice that they're double-headed because the Earth field is pulling on the fan cart, and so is the fan cart pulling on the Earth field. All right? It's a little distinction to help us remember that that's mutual, right? This is pulling just as much as that is pulling on Earth, and they're connected by this gravitational pull. And we're just going to label them FG, FG, FG. Okay, so far so good. Well, the track is probably in contact with looks like it's in contact with the carts, and that's a perpendicular contact, so that would be the normal forces between them, right? Notice we're not really caring about, these aren't the forces here, these are interactions. The interactions have forces involved. We'll show you those in a second. And maybe the carts are touching each other. We saw in the video that they actually blew apart from each other pretty quickly, but there's a contact force between them as well. And there we go. And maybe there's no friction. It said constant velocity, so I would think I can't think of any kind of friction that would make it go faster, and I can't think of any kind of friction that would make it go slower. I can always think of friction making it go slower, but that doesn't work. Then we make this little outline here that kind of cuts all these interactions a little bit, except for this one in the middle. That one ends up going away because it's inside the system. So we have a system outline. This is our system of focus. All right, let's take a look at what those things were called. Those are objects, right? So when we get down to the object level of detail, we want to use what's called a free body diagram. Basically, it's a collection of particles that are treated as having no internal structure. So an object can be anything, but we usually say, like, this object is an apple. We don't have to worry about all the seeds inside or how much is on one side of the fruit versus the other. We just say, yep, it's all centered on the little dot. Okay, that's kind of how it is. And then we can use force arrows to draw on those. So I'll show you that with the fan carts again. There's our system, if you recall. And remember, our system of focus was the two fan carts working together as one. So we're going to represent that with a dot. Boom, there it is, right? That dot represents our system, kind of simplified. We don't have to draw anything. We just draw a little dot saying, hey, okay, now what interactions are crossing that boundary we just made? It looks like the weights of the two cars. So that would be a good one to draw. The weight, we know that pulls down. And what would be supporting that? Hey, the track is supporting both of the carts. Sure, these are the forces. And yeah, I did make them the same size for some reason. We said constant velocity, and we said the amount of net taps will change velocity. So if there's no net tap, then the velocity will remain the same. So if I have an upward tap and a downward tap, and these are continuous, but they're continuously up and this one's continuously down, and they're the same, then it's going to keep moving at a constant velocity. All right. Let's take a look at force notation really quick. We already know that F is for force, and then we have the type listed below in the subscript, and then we're going to add a couple other things. It's called agent object notation. So the type indicates what it is. Like, is it gravitational? Is it normal? Is it friction? Is it spring? Is it tension? That kind of stuff. Is it magnetic? Is it electric? All those wonderful forces that we have. The agent is basically a special object that's outside of the system of focus, right? So it's basically what the force is coming from, and it's like the doer, right? The dealer. And then the object that we're looking at, that we're focused on, is the feeler. And this is the object the force is on. So this would be like the force of gravity by the earth on me. That would be one way to look at it. So looking at that, we can then come back to this and say, hey, look, earth field acting on the fan carts. So this is a complete notation there. Now we've kind of incorporated our idea about the system, and now we have it, the weight of the fan carts by the earth field. So that would be the weight, Fg, force of gravity by the earth field on the fan carts. What about the normal force? Okay, it's the normal force by the track acting on the fan carts. Notice they're always acting on the fan carts. They belong on this dot. If we were talking about the track, I'd have another dot over here for track, and I'd show the track getting pushed down by the carts. It'd be being pulled down by the weight, and I'd have to think there must be something that would keep that track from falling because it's not falling. So we'd have to expand our scope and look beyond just the track. What is the track sitting on? And so on. All right. Next time, you're going to be looking at a couple of situations and applying this stuff, right? And next time, hopefully, will be synchronous. All right. Catch you next time. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.